Today, when we see the word CD Projekt, we think about terrifically Slavic open-world role-playing games. Perhaps we think of a card game, or more often than anything today, a first-person cyberpunk adventure. But these are all the fruits of CD Projekt Red, the development studio founded in 2002. Their parent company, CD Projekt, has been distributing games throughout Poland as far back as 1994. You see, years before CDP started to make games, they sold them. And they sold them in one of the most unforgiving markets on the planet. For decades, the media market in communist Poland was dominated by piracy. In a country with no copyright law to speak of, where people had little money, open-air markets were the most common way to get music, movies, or games. Where cheap knockoffs were sold alongside official boxed copies for a fraction of the price. So when the Iron Curtain finally came down and Poland emerged into capitalism, the market was full of a generation of people who had been conditioned to think that piracy was the norm and official releases were like special editions. It's the knowledge of this consumer behavior that helped CD Projekt beat the pirates. They struck deals with foreign developers to sell games like Ace Ventura and Baldur's Gate. Then they cracked those games open and localized them into Polish. They made special Polish box art and packaged the games with goodies, cloth maps, mousepads, and much more. They would beat piracy the only way they knew how, not by using DRM, but by making the official boxed copy of the game worth that extra cost. So why am I telling you this? Well, because the spirit of CD Projekt's distribution company would go on to create one of the most powerful forces in games preservation today. A team of people who hunt down the code for forgotten games, who broker deals between companies all around the world, and then break those games apart to recode them to work on modern systems. To many people, GOG.com is just another place to buy games. But today we're going to uncover the incredible work that these people do behind the scenes, their never-ending mission to bring good old games back from the dead.
In the early days, like when I joined this, let's say close to 20 years ago, I'd say the biggest competitor for CD Projekt was the piracy. That was like the biggest thing in Poland. I mean, compared to today, you know, back then it was like really bad. Like rarely anyone bought new games. The games were expensive, and you know, the typical, you know, folks were just saying, you know, why would you spend so much money on a game if you can buy it? You know, you can go to the stadium. We called it Stadium Dziesięciolecia. We had like, you know, basically that's not a sports stadium, but back in the day it was just basically used for selling all kind of, you know, illegal goods with movies, games, music, whatever you would think of. Yeah.
Real market, let's say the legal market, didn't exist, so everything was pirate software. We didn't know that it's a pirated thing because we were actually going to the flea markets, buying these CD-ROMs in the jewel cases, thinking that actually we are buying it straight from developer or publisher. We were happy, we were getting them sometimes with a very weird localization, but again we just thought, okay, maybe they didn't have enough resources or not enough money, so it was interesting to enjoy it. At the same time, from time to time we were getting these big boxes from our parents. We were thinking these are collector's editions, but actually these were the actual copies, like proper big DVD cases with some manuals, instructions.
At that point, basically the guys like kind of made maybe the obvious discovery from our point of view that, you know, there's no way to fight piracy with DRMs. Because I don't think there's any title which was not pirated. It's maybe a matter of time, sometimes hours, sometimes maybe days. There were titles which took longer, but in the end, all this stuff is pirated. So there was always, this one sentence that actually Marcin used to repeat, which like really strikes a chord in me. If a paying legal customer has to go through some extra hassle because of a DRM, while the the guy who just downloaded the game from illegally doesn't have to go through, then there's something really wrong at that point. Yeah, I mean, why you're paying for this and you have worse experience? How comes? Yeah, so at that point, I think this kind of anti-DRM, anti-copy protection kind of thing was already part of the DNA of the company, and we were trying more to win the hearts of the customers with the content, with the titles. With the prices rather than with any kind of copy protections. So once we moved into hey, let's do stuff digital, let's try to do our own digital distribution platform, I think it was kind of very obvious that you would start from that point.
DRM, or digital rights management, has been around for decades. In the modern era, it usually involves digital licenses that ensure you are the person who purchased the game, like logging into your iTunes account or Steam. With the rise of digital distribution in the mid-2000s, CD Projekt's founders, Marcin Iwiński and Michał Kaczynski, saw an opportunity to bring their learnings from the distribution days into this modern era. So they founded a new subsidiary, GOG, or Good Old Games.
GOG is the digital heritage of our distribution business. We saw how the digital is developing, and it was only Steam, but we thought it's super cool for the gamers. When initially we found our niche with the back catalog. So back catalog, the learnings from the Baldur's Gate, so the reverse engineering, making it compatible and whatnot, and most importantly, great selection, what we're always good at, and the best service for gamers we can provide. So that intentionally was the fundament of GOG, plus obviously DRM-free. That's what we believed in.
Why is the DRM-free so important to you?
Because it's freedom. It's do what you want with your game. We trust you. It comes from the days of piracy here, and it's like us with Baldur's Gate competing against the pirates, and it was always the carrot, never the stick. So because we make such a great thing and it's fairly priced, and there's great service and we guarantee it works, and you can be part of the community, we are sure you will buy it, and you will not steal it. And even if we protect it, you still can get a cracked version. So why should we give you an inferior version? And it proved the point. Why to buy back catalog games? Why do you need that? Some of them you probably won't play them, but I want to have them in my collection, so you have a beautifully looking digital shelf and digital collection of games. I think that's fundamentally the all learnings from our distribution combined.
The meeting I recall still in my head was the meeting with the other founder, Michał Kaczynski, and I think we had just 1 hour meeting, which basically ended with a very little sticky note just saying, classic titles, DRM-free, low price points, super easy, buying experience, that's it, yeah? It's it's obvious, yeah, in a way, why not?
So what were the games then, back then, that you targeted? What were the companies you tried to
It was super simple. The goal was to bring at least one big publisher on board, and to convince somebody that we can go DRM-free. And I remember meeting absolutely everybody, explaining how cool it is, and I still remember this feeling of us being small, super tiny guys nobody knew about, and the only thing that helped was Marcin, whom some of these guys knew from the distribution side.
I remember a lot of frustration of a lot of people who were basically knocking on all the doors of all the developers and publishers they knew, and it wasn't in a way no way. It was more sure guys, that's bold idea I guess, but we would like someone to try this first before we'll sign.
We clearly understood that our main competition is piracy, because these games were available on so-called abandonware websites or just some weird resources, and we were thinking how we need to convince gamers to buy it from us, because somehow they can get it for free. And many of them will consider that getting this from these abandonware websites will be legal. So we thought, okay, let's add as much bonus goodies as possible. Let's make sure it's compatible with modern operating systems. More or less, let's do as much as we can.
The team spent months traveling to companies trying to get the first one to sign. In the end, it was the connections from those old days that came through. In fact, it was the same distribution partner that had given CDP their big break back in the 90s. The owners of Baldur's Gate, Interplay.
Actually, we managed to convince Interplay which was actually a very good starting point considering a lot of classics they had, especially Fallout 1, Fallout 2. At that time it was Interplay and Cody's as well, and then that's how we started. But it was quite a long process, and I think that we secured those titles. Like, we're very close to launching really, and we're still fighting, still visiting all the studios trying to sign something. Nice. But then it somehow magically happened. Like, I remember that I think at some point it was Ubisoft. I'm not 100% sure. Actually, they came to us and said, guys, that's cool stuff. Let's release our titles here. It's like, wow. At that point you kind of get this feeling. Okay, maybe we're onto something here, yeah.
And there were really cool people working at Ubisoft who were also like crazy gamers, and they totally supported us. And they said, okay, let's try it out. It was like a snowball effect. So first partner joined us, and then it was easier. We were coming to others telling, hey guys, so Ubisoft is already with us. Do you want to be between the first ones, or you want to be the last one? Nobody wants to be the last one, nobody wants to be the first one. So it was easier to convince many companies afterwards.
If GOG thought that getting permission to do the work was going to be the biggest hurdle, then they were in for a shock. Getting each game to the platform would be its own unique challenge. Before they had a chance to find the source code, before they tried to recreate the box art or program the game to work on modern operating systems, they would first have to find out who owned it. This work was done by GOG's business development team, and more often than not, these puzzles took years to solve.
I think it always starts with the research on our side. So we're trying to understand who might have the rights for this product nowadays. So it's simple, it's just going through different things like Moby Games, Wikipedias, then talking to some guys from the companies that were developing this game back to that time, or to producers of those games, asking, do you know who might have the rights for it nowadays? In easy cases, they will just tell us, okay, the rights stay definitely with the publisher. And then we just go to publisher and tell him, hey guys, can you please push your legal team or convince your legal team to a research on this particular game if you still have the rights for it or not. If we're lucky, the legal team will find some time for us and they will say, yes, guys, definitely let's add it to our existing agreement. In other cases, the company might say, yes, we probably hold some rights, but not all of them, so we don't want to bother. And then you need to do their homework for them. So we need to go and check who might have the rights for example, for music, who have the rights for the IP, and usually publisher still holds the rights for the code. And let's say more or less all these derivative products, like box art, etc., etc. These are the most complicated things.
So when we talk about, for example, big publishers, they always have a certain procedures and there is a culture within their organization which you're not aware of. So first thing you need to do is to understand what is this culture. If they're money driven, they're a public company, they have any requirements which they have to comply due to whatever reasons. When we try to sign some older titles and we learn something about like the company does no longer exist. And you have to think like, where do you trace, like how do you get a game, how you get the game? Because it's usually in legal hell. That's how it's starting point. Somebody used to own a company, there was some partners, the company breaks, something happened with the right, there was a publisher, we don't know what's in the agreement between the publisher and the developer, so we have no idea which things were licensed, purchased, transferred, and then it starts. You go to one meeting, another meeting, learn a little piece of things, sometimes it's live, sometimes it's not, sometimes people just remember things differently. If there's two partners, that's the most interesting case because they usually have different understanding what was in the agreement. So until you get your hands on the initial source, which is whether the papers or the people who actually created those documents, you don't really know what's the story there. And we end up with the completely different stories, like people hating each other for some reason because they couldn't bear to work together, and then we have to help them to find a peace between each other. Or we learn that there's one entity which owns the rights for the IP, and then there's another entity which owns the right for code, and there's a writing which is belong to the third party, and they don't even know each other.
Right.
And they have no idea that they own the thing.
The team had wandered into a legal nightmare. The games they were trying to re-release were created in an era where nobody was future-proofing these legal agreements, during a time where the games industry was a merry-go-round of acquisitions and mergers. This meant that oftentimes, to get a game released on GOG, the team would embark on years of negotiation.
Lots of gamers were asking for Star Wars games, especially old ones. So this was one of our holy grails. Something that we were fighting for, and that when we managed to sign it, we were super happy, because we were going through lots of iterations together with Lucas and then later on with Disney, when we were so close to sign it, and then management changes. For about 3 months there is silence, and then we start from scratch. So again, same pitch, totally new people. Like, what do you want from us? Like, different people from manager position to SVP level at Lucas at that time, and then we were lucky enough to find again some gamers at Disney that helped us a lot.
As you know, SWAT 4 is published by Activision, and for a long period of time it was challenging for us to understand what is the blockers for us to get certain titles. But everything changed the moment we got a US team on board, because now GOG has European office and we have US office which is dealing with the business, and our US business team managed very quickly to get a proper line of communication with the Activision, because they are both Americans, and that's a culture. So we realized that everything we were doing wrong was basically just not being fully aware of the US culture, even though everybody knows about US culture, right? But even being international and knowing like how things are going in different parts of the world, there were still blockers which we couldn't break by just being 10,000 miles away.
Probably the most tough one so far was getting the rights for gold box titles and old Warhammer titles. Those ones were with SSI, and SSI went through quite a few mergers, acquisitions, Mattel, Wars Group, then part of their rights were bought by Ubisoft with Myst Games. So we had to actually talk with lots of people involved in those deals in order to understand who actually holds the rights for the code of these gold box titles, like Eye of the Beholder nowadays. And then we found that company, and they have nothing to do with the software nowadays.
Right.
And they were like telling, okay guys, we might have somebody in our archives where we put all the things we've acquired across the last 20 years, but it's like a separate company that just archiving all these deals. If you've managed to find somebody interested there, maybe we'll be able to make a deal with you. Again, they didn't want to talk to us because like, who are you, GOG, CD Projekt, Polish company? It's a tough one. So we had to ask our lawyers whom we're working with for help, because when they're coming with their big titles with the huge firms behind them, at least these guys will talk to them.
So I'm coming from Russia, so initially when I came to GOG, it was very important for me that I can bring some historical context from my region, where I come from, some games which were developed in Russia but were never released in English territories or outside of Russia. And it was interesting for me to find out that a lot of the agreements for all the titles, which I praised as a kid, nobody actually signed any papers.
Right.
So there is just a buddy agreements between people, which we had to formalize before we could sign, have legal grounds to release the games on GOG. So you have to find these people, and you know, some of them are living in Australia, some of them are living back in Russia, some of them in the States. It's a culture again. We're going back to the point of the culture where things are done differently in different parts of the world. For example, in Japan, there is I know cases where publishers are not signing any papers with the vendor providers because everything in Japan is based on a trust, that you have to trust someone in order to do something, and if you fail once, your reputation is destroyed. So because big publishers are in position of the force, they would not sign some papers with vendor providers just saying that we'll trust you, and because of that you're going to work with us. And they do, they pay money, and they proceed to working like this.
The team used their own favourite games as a launch point for the service, but they also took inspiration from the wider gaming community. hunting down the rights for dozens of games that were either lost to time or incompatible with modern operating systems. Over the years, this community wishlist has expanded, but the games at the top are almost all projects that GOG has been working on getting for years.
Right now, there are people in the back trying to get No One Lives Forever and Dune 2 onto the...
Well, you'll be surprised, but we talked about No One Lives Forever like just a week ago. It's ongoing. Like, oh, I have this new lead about this thing. Really? We haven't talked about it for a year. Great. So what do you know? What do you know? Let's check what we have in our archives about that. That's a new development. This guy 2 years ago told us that we don't have rights for this and this. Maybe he was not 100% correct.
You guys are like detectives.
I think if I will get fired one day from GOG, I'm probably gonna go to work as a detective.
But one game I remember that kept coming up over and over again was Homeworld Cataclysm. And it's on the system now.
Yes, it is.
It has this really interesting description that says that we changed the name, but it's literally the same game.
It's exactly the same title.
Right, so I'm guessing Blizzard somehow had...
Because somebody has the rights for Cataclysm trademark, right?
Yeah.
And they're using it actively in the World of Warcraft, so...
Which is crazy considering, I think Homeworld Cataclysm came out like a decade before.
Yes. It's just a matter that, again, some companies prefer to protect themselves better, or protect their IPs. I think they have nothing against generally using Homeworld Cataclysm, but if you're going through a legal team, again, they're not gamers, they just need to make sure they protect their company in the best possible way.
Black and White, that's locked up by Lionhead, or someone else probably has it, or...
We're still working on it. It's a very complicated story because nobody can actually explain who has the rights for it.
Right.
Because when you're asking Microsoft, do you have the rights for it? They're telling no. When you're asking Lionhead, they're like, they're part of Microsoft. They're also telling no. So maybe there are some individuals that are involved in this whole process, but still, they don't have all the rights. They have only part of the rights. Still, maybe one day.
What about something a little bit more? I don't know. I didn't realize if the Westwood stuff was that hard to come by. Dune 2, for instance.
That's well, with the rights again, it's super clear here. So part of them it was with Westwood. So let's assume with Electronic Arts nowadays. But another part is with the family.
Right.
The IP rights.
Kroger?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the problem is that I'm not sure the relationship between these two companies are good or bad. I don't know, but apparently that's what I've heard. It's really tough to find the compromise between these two parties. In the past, many companies were not thinking about getting perpetual rights, for example. They were getting the rights for 1 year, 2 years, and then they will think, okay, the game will die. It's nowadays when the game has a longer life cycle. At that time, okay, we are using it for 2 years, done. In many cases, they were crazy deals with some actors, for example, when they were paying them crazy amount of dollars per copy, thinking that they will be selling the game only for $60.
Right.
And once you're telling guys, we want to sell it for $10 nowadays, they're like, no. The royalties we need to pay per copy for this or that actor, they're already 20. And like, whoa, what? And then lots of deals were just done for a few particular countries. And it gets so complicated sometimes, it's just painful. So some titles will never see the light, unfortunately, because of this thing.
I can see a company like Disney, for instance, they would say, we're signing away our games and it's not that big a market for us. Like Disney's a multi-billion-dollar company, right?
Yes.
So you're not going to sell it to them based on the dollars, right?
$1 billion, no. But at the same time, they're super happy when something is happening on the PR side. Like I remember how happy they were when we released Aladdin, Lion King, and again, I cannot say that it was like a super top seller for us. No, it sold quite well, but still the main thing was PR around these IPs, and I know that lots of people at Disney were super happy. Not even in the gaming department, but generally at Disney.
And you're also doing a lot of work for them in terms of actually getting this stuff up, right? That's part of the deal.
Yes, and then they can reuse it and sell it on other platforms, which is another bonus that they're getting from us.
If the BizDev team managed to solve the legal puzzle, and if they managed to get all parties on board and acknowledge and agree to the sale of the game, then they'd pass the project up to the products team. You'd think it would be plain sailing from this point, but sadly, you'd be wrong, because often the people who own the rights to these games have absolutely no idea where the code is.
for all these, for old games before year 2000, it is extremely rare to get a build from the developer. We are not talking even about the source code here, we are talking about the actual game. So yeah, I have the rights for it, but I have absolutely nothing for that game.
That's crazy.
So,
like not even like a copy of it buried
absolutely
somewhere.
nothing. So you have to do the research. You need to find out what this game had. You need to find the build. You need to be sure that you have all the goodies. Because our community was kind of unforgiving for missing something important. So yeah, you need to have that right. If the game had a active community, it was also a good practice to contact that community. Hey, we are working on release this game on GOG, because a lot of times there was something they could do to actually help us, because they were basically living and breathing this game. Often they had very useful information. Sometimes even they prepared an entire build for us. So hey, this is a fixed game. Just feel free to release it on GOG.
Fixing Carmageddon, for example, I know that community was helping us a lot. Developers were helping us a lot, trying to find some bits and pieces of the source code, and then we all together were working on that product to make it available for gamers. Then another one was not Theme Hospital, unfortunately, but Theme Park. That one was also broken, despite the fact many people were telling, come on, it will just work under DOSBox. Actually, it didn't. So we had to put again lots of efforts, make some reverse engineering, ask some of our external programmers to help on it. No, trust me, actually lots of external guys who work for GOG, and we use their help from time to time. They're just hardcore gamers.
The help from the community in some of the releases was enormous. As an example, I don't know, Wing Commander games, there was a site, still is, Wing Commander News. So basically there's a huge community of Wing Commander fans that was led by Ben Lesnick, who is now working, I think, on Star Citizen as one of the directors there even. So he helped us a lot, because they have gathered all the materials, all the development documents, and we have all of it on GOG.
One piece of technology that helped the product team immensely was DOSBox. DOSBox is a piece of software that emulates DOS running on an IBM PC, which allows modern operating systems to run many older incompatible games. The team uses this emulator as a wrapper on a lot of their older games, and often works with the creators of DOSBox to solve particularly puzzling problems.
At GOG we've been dealing with those games since the day one, so we kind of know the drill here. And those issues are usually related to DOSBox configuration, and they can be solved by that. There were some cases that were much more complicated, like for example Harvester, or it was Theme Park. Other times we had problems, like for example it was Realms of Arkania 3, in which the last boss couldn't be beaten. like really, the entire game works. Then you go to the last boss, and you have the last boss, you know, his posse, and you are killing everyone. But there is just this one guy at the bottom of the screen that just stands there. You can't interact with him, he's just there, you can't kill him. And basically the game includes him in the winning condition. So if he's there, you are unable to win the game. And we were like trying to fix it for so many hours. Yeah, so it turned out that there was a small problem with the memory allocation that we found, that basically a game when it was checking for the NPCs it should spawn in that particular scenario, it was adding one more. Also, a lot of times it's kind of a lights out game. So for example, you are fixing one issue and two more pop up, and so on and so forth. Like for example, which game was the Carmageddon 1? Yes. But for Carmageddon 1, we had like over 60 builds prepared for that game. Each build fixed something and broke another thing. And it happened for 60 times. The games that are really tricky to fix are the games that are DirectX games, but before DirectX 9. Those are very complicated. Shadows of the Empire. When we got the game, we couldn't even run it. Like really, we've tried everything. It was crashing. It was a disaster. Like even if we got it to run, there was all kind of graphical artifacts there. It looked like a hopeless case. What we ended up with doing is actually we've rewritten our entire DirectX wrapper. So basically, we've translated everything the game's engine is doing through a wrapper to DirectX 9. It was painful, it took a lot of time, but the end effect was awesome. The game works, and it works very, very good in all the systems right now.
One key job for the product team is pulling out whatever DRM may have been included in the original game. For more modern games, this is often some sort of online authentication software built into the code of the game. But DRM existed before games were even connected to the internet. This was often in the form of CD keys, code wheels, or even just by asking you to type in a particular word in the user manual.
There are different forms of DRM. We are dealing with each one differently. When we get the build from the developer that is not DRM free, it happens from time to time. We usually ask for the developer for a DRM free build. Say, hey, there is still something left here because our QA found it. Could you please? But a lot of times we don't have time. So we have a team that is able to do it. So then we are just informing developers, yeah, we got the build, that there was a part of the DRM here, we removed it by doing this and that, and yeah, if you are fine with that, and a lot of times this is just, yeah, go ahead, it's fine.
I remember like there's a lot of games that came out in the 90s that used like physical forms of DRM.
Yeah, the codebooks are very popular. So just put a word, the second word from the 28th page there. You know, that was the common DRM thing by there. You were removing it from the games in most cases. Some had more elaborate ones, like for example, there was a spinning wheel in which you have match specific things in order to get the correct answer to put actually in the game. And it was so cleverly tied to the game that we actually left that in, right. Because it was not just a question out of nowhere, that was actually the part of the game. Yeah, we are fixing those games, we are making sure that they work and that they are available for the future generation. We are gathering all the goodies that are associated with those games. Scanning all the manuals and all the language versions, all the design documents we can find, and we're basically really preserving it.
Do you have someone here who just scans manuals into PDFs? Or?
This is always the task of the new guy.
Once the product team had found the codes, torn out all the DRM, fixed the bugs, scanned all the manuals, and collected all the goodies they could find, the game is finally ready to be released. But each of these games is still part of the product team's responsibility. This team is responsible for ensuring that all the games work on as many operating systems as possible, and that includes new ones.
When Windows 10 came out, we literally launched all of the games we have on GOG to make sure that they work on the system, and if they didn't, we tried to fix them.
Wow.
It took a lot of time. Yeah, but I'm proud to say that we've managed to do it. There's like small percentages of the game that doesn't work on Windows 10. However, we did not forget about those games, and eventually I'm sure they will be fixed. And if there will be a Windows 11 or wherever, we will do the same thing.
GOG originally stood for Good Old Games, but the initialism has been dropped in recent years as the mission of the service has expanded. In March of 2012, GOG opened their doors to new games, focusing on getting DRM-free versions of AAA and indie titles onto their store. Right away, the indies were into it. For many of them, getting their game on GOG was seen as a mark of approval because the service was curated. That means that unlike other digital marketplaces, each game released on the platform had to be approved by GOG. but convincing major publishers to put AAA titles on a store DRM-free has continued to be difficult.
Let's say they always release the games with DRMs, for example, right? And if suddenly there's some guys coming saying, hey guys, don't worry, just release it DRM-free, right? I mean, surely in your head, like, there's some kind of like a warning sign, and what if our game will be pirated, yeah? And it's very easy to kind of, get into this like thinking. And if you would to make this kind of a change, let's say suddenly start releasing games DRM-free, you probably would need to have some kind of approval from this director, that director. Then there is legals involved, and the legals will tell you, no, hell, no way, just don't do this, guys. You will just have a ton of problems. I think even if there's one or two guys there that we talk to who say, yes, we totally understand what you guys are doing, but please understand us. We're working in a very complex company with a ton of different stakeholders. We have to convince a lot of people. You can throw at me, like, from the, let's say, the devil's advocate perspective, you can say, look, those 3, 5, 10, whatever super big franchises, they all had DRM. Did they sell well? Yes, they did. So why should we ditch it?
Right.
We're trying to make, like, slowly, like water erodes the rock, just saying, hey, but look, Witcher 3 launched without DRMs and it sold a lot of copies, right? So you can do it. And they say, maybe. I guess we need more and more cases like that, yeah.
Is it hard? Yes, it got definitely harder. That's why we don't have so many day one AAA releases. Because, as I told you, that publishers and developers are still scared of this. And sometimes it's just probably a matter of people getting used to certain approaches in business, and it takes some time to change your approach once you see that it's not impacted. I had a very nice test case with The Witcher 3 that was released on day one, DRM-free on GOG. Nothing happened. The game still sells. I've heard it sells quite well. And I think outsells many games that were released with DRM, even though some IPs were bigger at the time. Still, can we convince everybody with just this example? Unfortunately not. We still have, let's say, fight that is happening all the time, trying to explain, showcase, bring different numbers, graphs, quotes, studies, but it just takes time. I really believe that one day we'll manage to break through it, especially with the support of our community, which is very vocal, and we appreciate their support.
As GOG took on more new release games, the demands of their audience and publishing partners started to have an effect on the product. They realized that developers wanted to be able to add updates themselves, and that with new games being patched so often nowadays, players wanted to have the ability to auto-update their titles. So they created a new front end, GOG Galaxy, which provides one-click installation, access to community features, all with the same control over the DRM-free installations as before. The work to create this complex networked software accidentally created an opportunity for GOG and CD Projekt Red to collaborate. While these two companies share a building and eat at the same cafeteria, they work independently of each other. That was until the developers across the hall decided to make a competitive card game.
So then, fast forward, Gwent became a big success, inside The Witcher. And the decision was made, hey, let's actually make it, a game, which is, quite more impressive than the Gwent in Witcher 3 ever was. I guess someone just thought, okay, so we have those guys at GOG, they are like having, they run, 1,000 or so servers powering GOG. They probably know some stuff about networking, right? We know stuff about developing games, so why don't we really work together? Yeah, so it was kind of like a obvious, perfect match made in heaven. I mean, Gwent is a kind of a separate project. I mean, like, we have GOG running as GOG, and the team working on Gwent with CD Projekt actually is separate. I guess, if this will work well, and so far it works really great. We're very, happy with the feedback we get from Gwent and with the numbers of people playing. So I guess we'll be trying to reapply this maybe in future games. Probably that could be the one way to do it. Definitely, working on GOG Galaxy, this is another thing that's very, very important to us. I know we still have a lot of catching up to do. And of course, the release of games, this is a never-ending chase. The games which were, day ones a couple of years ago, soon will be classics. No, we're very passionate, in the stuff that we're doing. We love games, and our goal is to basically release as many DRM-free titles, quality ones, as we can, and this is what we're going to push forward.
Since its founding, GOG has had an immeasurable effect on the gaming world. Not only are they responsible for bringing hundreds of games back from the dead, but their mission to encourage developers to drop DRM in favor of more consumer-friendly practices has been an important counter-argument in an industry that so often tries to take advantage of its consumers. This team has managed to change perception of DRM as the only answer to piracy, all stemming from the lessons they learned growing up in modern Polish society. If they could do that, I had to wonder if it was possible for them to tear down other seemingly insurmountable walls.
From my layman's perspective, the architecture of consoles has become more and more closer to a PC. So it doesn't seem to be an architecture problem so much as it is a, I don't know, legal licensing, whatever problem. Can you imagine a future in which they'd allow, like,
those games to be ported on on PC? Oh, I would love to have first PSX games, PS1. Oh yeah. I think it might be possible at some point. However, from what we've been able to gather, because we did the research, it might be very complicated. Because how the rights are structured there. However, I wouldn't say that this is impossible, and I would certainly love to have some of the console games on GOG. Because we would be able to make them work.
Right. And how about...
Maybe we've already tried.
Okay, so I'm Piotr, or Peter, and I'm the support team leader. I know that your favorite game is SWAT 4, because I heard from one of the guys. So the most common problem with SWAT 4, if you can call it a problem, is people not being able to play multiplayer.
Right.
Multiplayer works fine, but it's direct IP based. You don't have a server browser or like matchmaking stuff people are used to. So you need to either use some tunneling software to do this the easy way and find your mate, or do some like port forwarding, some stuff people are not accustomed to, if they're not our age, I suppose.
Opening command prompt and putting in like IP config to find out your IP.
Yeah, and going to your router settings to make sure that the port used by SWAT 4 is actually mapped to your local IP in your network. Working at GOG in general, helping people, yes, it's kind of who I am. That's why I, main support classes.
Perfect.
It's kind of who I am, I suppose.
Right.
But it still does affect. We have quite a lot of, like since the GOG Galaxy launched. I mean, I cannot tell you numbers. I would love to, but I cannot. It's really impressive. Like, if you see how many people are logged at any point into GOG Galaxy, it's like really impressive.
Oh yeah, that must be a fun number to see as well. Like, just to be able to like know.
I have it here, but I cannot show it still. Sorry.
Just set up a mirror next time.